Welcome to episode 7 of the AltBrau podcast. Today we speak with Connor Casey, co-founder of CellarMaker Brewing Company in San Francisco. We talk about the upcoming SF Beer Week, some collaborations they've been working on, and the challenges of being a 10-barrel brewery. If you like what you're listening to, feel free to follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And if you'd like to reach out, you can email us. Just check out the website, altbrau.com, for all your information. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the episode. So today I didn't plan on talking about how you and Tim got started necessarily and how you met. There's plenty of other interviews when you did, your first 6 months to a year and a half that you were doing interviews. It's people can Google it. It's right there.
It's just the next level.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I had asked you to do it, you had even said you're a little bit further along now. You're like, I actually have some opinions formed now that you've
since we did a lot of interviews in the first year or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Obviously, the next big thing coming into San Francisco is SF Beer Weeks on the horizon. A lot of events coming up. I started kind of going through the list. My wife was reading the list this morning, and she's like, "Oh my God, that's only a week, like the first 48 hours." I was like, "Yeah, I know."
Yeah. There's a lot more to be announced. all the people who are flying by the seat of their pants who are going to announce stuff in the last 8 days, like we are.
I was just saying all those people, and that was meaning you.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as events go, I'm definitely seeing in the market people getting away from total tap takeovers. There's still a couple out there, but I'm talking to bartenders out there, and they're kind of saying they're going for more themed nights. So I'm working with Old Devil Moon on one. It's just going to be like a North Bay night. So they'll have Hen House. They'll have what is it? I think they'll have 101 maybe. They're going to get Mad Fritz. So
that's cool. I mean, I like the idea of we've always done a lot of events, not just us, but with another brewery or two or three. Because it's an excuse to hang out with our friends and people who you don't see that often. So if you can make an event out of it, why not?
Right.
But I couldn't agree more. The tap takeover as a concept it's just way too simple.
It's kind of tired.
Yeah, and my experience has always been that I go to these things and for an hour and a half or two, nobody's really chatting to the person on hand from the brewery, and then just when they've had enough beers to actually get chatty, you're like, all right, I've been here 3.5 hours, I'm ready to leave. And then you're like, I really want to talk, but no, I think the idea of doing new events for us, we really want to do. There's too much of the same old, so we don't want to waste our time or anyone else's time doing a tap takeover or anything that's too simple. This year we're doing a metal show at Amnesia.
That's sweet.
It was exactly based around kind of what you're talking about, your question here. We were like, there's so much of the same, and early on people were like, I remember there was a brewer doing a yoga event, and he's like, you guys, in our first year at Beer Week, we did a tap takeover at our own bar. But at the time, a brewery with only 4 fermenters, it was really hard for us to get more than 8 beers on tap at first. We still are so grateful that people had such a positive response, but it was like, oh my God, we just opened with 4 10-barrel fermenters, and this beer, we're never going to rush our beer, but at the same time, people are just crushing these beers. And so it was the first time we ever were able to stash enough kegs to get all 12 taps filled. And he's like, man, you should do a yoga event. And I was like, yoga's cool, but we're never going to have a yoga event.
Not exactly
at
your
the brewery. So we're doing this metal event, and we're actually flying in one of the staff's favorite bands called The Well from Austin, Texas. Awesome, kind of Sabbathy metal band. And we're also bringing in 2 local bands, Mesmer as well as Hellfire. Hellfire is lightly affiliated with the brewery, but all really great guys. It's at Amnesia, which is run by Craig from City Beer. Craig was an old boss of mine, definitely somewhat of a mentor, and we sell them beer on the regular, so it made sense. It's in San Francisco. It's something different. It's an opportunity for people to have a lot of fun, including our staff. We're doing it we're doing it at a time when the brewery tasting room is closed anyway, so everyone gets to have fun, and I'm really into that. It's something different.
For sure. That sounds awesome. I mean, as far as events go, do you feel like we've already covered tap takeovers? I mean, is there the wrong way to do events and the right way? I mean, as far as perspective and how to approach it?
You need to look at the venue. You need to kind of go how much can we get out of this venue? Do they have a full kitchen? Is it just a tap room? What do I do in this little tap room that can keep it interesting and doesn't, stretch their boundaries too much? I'm not if they don't have a fridge, we're not going to do a cheese pairing. But if they're like really into that, or they've got an amazing, we've done dinners at Monk's Kettle. It's not pub food. It's really like awesome, amazing every single course, and you put a lot of effort into it, and it's really for the love of the game, and everyone who goes to that event never forgets, and you hear about it for a long time. But
it's playing into their strengths.
Exactly, exactly.
Whatever the venue is kind of already has an audience for, you're saying like, I want to participate. My brand or my brewery, whatever, wants to participate in this bar's thing, whatever the in-house
the food stuff for us has always been fun because we all love food. We have a tap room without a kitchen, which when you do have a kitchen, it's really complicated. I won't go into it, but there's a reason we don't have one.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it doesn't mean that we don't really like to have fun with food, with the beer. The tasting room is somewhat of a sterile environment to drink beer and smell beer and experience beer in, and it's definitely something, when I have a beer of ours off-site, or even if I'm cracking a growler at home, and you're cooking something in the oven, and you smell, the smells of salt and everything, and it's bouncing off of that, and the beer really pops so much more than it does just in a tap room, and I feel that way about pretty much any brewery, but the comparison smells are huge. So
it gives you an opportunity, though, to not only present your beer in a new way for people who are, if somebody's normally just in your tap room all the time and you tell them to go to an event, maybe it's to a bar they've never been to, but they get to see your beer in a new light. And obviously creates business for the account. So you're saying thank you to some accounts. You're saying you're killing multiple birds with one stone.
Totally.
So right way, wrong way, basically playing into.
I think outside the box is the key here.
Right.
It's what can we do that's going to keep it interesting for drinkers? What can we do? I want to be one step ahead. I don't want to be doing what everybody else is doing. So for us this year, it was doing the musical event. The other thing we do is we've got about 20 offsite accounts, draft accounts. We self-distribute. The beer's super fresh. We have a good relationship with all of them. There's only 20 of them. They're like family to us, and there's plenty of time where like demand's high, and we're like, there's other breweries out there that would just drop all their accounts and sell it all themselves, and we could do that. That feels like it'd be really rude and really wrong, and there are unwritten rules in this industry, and to me, the loyalty to those brands, to those bars is extremely important. But what we do is we rotate. We've got some accounts in the South Bay, some in the North Bay, some in the East Bay, all the way as far south as Santa Cruz, and all the way up as far as Sacramento and Roseville. We rotate. So at this, we've got 4 accounts in the South Bay. We've done an event at each of them now, and now we're back to a repeat. And like, that's just fair and square.
Yeah.
Like there's no, it's not too complicated, but it's really just making sure everyone gets a turn, not picking any favorites. And we've always believed in, from an aspect of choosing what bars we sell beer to, really looking at the map and going, okay, nice little cluster in San Francisco, check. Mix of beer bars as well as restaurants that are beer-focused restaurants, as well as restaurants that are just focused on their food and doing their thing, and maybe they only have 3 or 4 taps. That's great too. So a nice diversity. Same thing in the East Bay, kind of Berkeley, Oakland area. But once you get outside of that, for us, we're looking at the map and we're saying, okay, let's make sure we have a bar. Okay, great. We have a bar in Dublin. They're called Caps and Taps. They're amazing. Great people. That covers that whole aspect of the East Bay. We got Beercraft in Santa Rosa, Roanoke Park area. That gives people an area to drink our beer there. So we've always kind of looked at the map and tried to spread it out. Same thing with Beer Week. We do one event in the South Bay, one event in the East Bay, one event in the North Bay, and no need to do an event at 2 different beer bars 5 miles apart, 2 nights back to back. It's just spread it out. We don't have a marketing team. We don't have a sales team.
Right.
It's Tim, Kelly, and I, and we'll bring a manager or a bartender to have a fun night and a brewer, and that's it.
That's all you need,
We're not trying to do anything too crazy, and definitely have fun with it. So,
how many Northeast IPAs and adjunct stouts you think you're going to see this beer week?
That's going to be the big release,
right? Everyone's going to be putting out their yogurt company collab IPA.
Totally
chunky and
sour IPAs.
Yeah, and then your lactose, vanilla, chocolate, coffee, waffle. Whatever.
As many adjuncts as you can fit on the label, not because it's a purpose, but just because it's a lot of adjuncts.
So, obviously that's the big thing going on in the industry right now. You guys have obviously experimented with lots of different, subcategories of IPAs or different approaches to IPAs, different yeast strains, different hop characters like, you have your, English styles, you have your West Coast styles. I mean, I remember when the East Coast was, as far as hoppy, was really only known for like Dogfish Head 90 Minute. That was, about
That's
it.
a whole different kind of East Coast.
Yeah, exactly.
IPA.
It's a whole other thing. But that at the time, I remember for a long time, I think that was, what people, at least people on the West Coast had in mind. And so now you've got these brands that are, doing it. And I've actually seen quite a few brands on the West Coast that I still liked their versions. Now, given I'm probably not getting the freshest version of the East Coast ones when I get it from one of my friends.
That's worth talking about.
Yeah, we're
drink beer in your own backyard. Be grateful for your local brewery that makes good fresh beer. Buy their beer. When you're trading, you're ruining their beer for the guy who drinks it on the East Coast, and vice versa. When you're out in Boston, go to Trillium and crush a bunch of Trillium and have a blast. And their beer is fantastic. And if you're in LA, go to Monkish and drink a bunch of Monkish. But the idea that you need to drink Monkish in Boston and you need to drink Trillium in LA and have this beer that travels so far, I don't know. I think there was a point in time, and it wasn't that long ago. I want to say it was even 4 or 5 years ago, and I definitely traded for beer for a while and was into that. But there was not a Nelson IPA in San Francisco, so I had a buddy in San Diego send me Alpine Nelson, and there was nobody making Galaxy beers in the Bay Area, period, 5-6 years ago. And I remember, so I got a growler at Hill Farm, said Double Galaxy, and it was fantastic. And it's, really great hop, great beer, great brewery. Cool. Now we have local breweries who are making all these things and, varying levels of quality, all kinds of different approaches as far as yeast goes, as far as the grain, the hops, how you're using it. But there's good local breweries around a lot more than there were 5 years ago.
So you guys just started doing, is it a monthly bottling?
We do a monthly bottling. It's about all we can handle at our size. It's something, we wanted to have packaged in another format and in a package format. And that's the best thing for a lot of people. And, sometimes for some people, 32 ounces of growler beer is a lot of beer. Maybe they're trying to drink a little less that week or whatever, or they want to drink lots of different
January,
things.
Man. It's New Year's resolution.
Yeah, the gyms are full.
So, are you seeing already a problem with those bottles popping up in places they shouldn't?
Yeah,
that's going to happen.
It pops up on the Twitter. Some guy's drinking your pale ale that you bottled in April. I don't want to know what that tastes like. What are you waiting for? If you got good hoppy beer in your fridge, open it, drink it. That's part of it. I'd like to think that a lot of it's drank fresh. Local, I don't know. It's you can only do so much. I think some breweries think that their job's done when the beer's made. Our approach has always been our job is really to make sure that the beer is delivered direct to not just to the bar, but to the actual consumer in the freshest way possible. And that's why we deliver all of our hoppy beer. We have one delivery day a week on Thursday, and all the hoppy beers are coming out on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And every bar is required to tap it within 7 days when they get it and to keep it cold. Kind of crazy conceptually 2.5, 3 years ago. People are like, are you kidding me? That's really aggressive. But it's the way we like the beer to taste. And we want people to know that if they're drinking a beer from our brand, that it's going to be, sub 20 days. On the bottles, we put a very clear bottle date. There's no Julian date or any tricky stuff like that. And it says drink within 21 days. And I even think, drink within like 15 days or 10 days. I don't know. There'll be another IPA from another brewery or from, I don't know, someone else.
Or you can wait 20 more days and get your next bottle.
Yeah. So there's always more beer around the corner. No need to hang on to it.
As far as we were talking about the adjunct stouts and stuff like that, you guys are obviously known for the coffee and cigarettes, porter, another dark malty beer that's got some adjuncts. But I would say of those styles, it's definitely balanced in my opinion. I've never felt like it was too syrupy. Also on the back end, I do have a one bottle sitting in my fridge right now of the Imperial coffee and cigarettes from the last time when you guys bottled that. Was it last month?
Early December.
So
I'll still be drinking good and keeping it cold is
that's key.
Big thing. Yeah,
for sure.
I think the adjunct thing's something to talk about. I mean, and I think we're constantly wading back and forth between tradition versus kind of bringing up new concepts and new ideas. And I think a balance is really important. I mean, brewing's been around for so long. I mean, hundreds and thousands of years. There's people who figured out a bunch of amazing flavors a long time ago, and a good traditional English porter, no adjuncts, just high quality malts with an English ale strain is awesome, and nobody needs to mess with that. it kind of feels like a little bit of an attention-grabbing thing that's going on in the industry right now with how many adjuncts can we get in the beer? What is the whack? We put Doritos in our beer. Fuck. Okay, does it taste good is always the number one question. And what is the purpose of putting these adjuncts into the beer? And, did they ferment out? I mean, are you putting maple syrup in your beer and it's post-fermentation and
you don't taste any maple syrup?
Yeah, or it's just you're drinking like syrup. I think that there's like a point where you want these ingredients to be subtly integrated, but it can't be too literal. You can't literally be drinking a cake in a glass. Beer's beer and cake's cake. We do some adjunct beers, and I think the market demands them, and I think making sure the adjuncts you use are something that you agree with, and making sure that they're sourced properly and it's not too artificial tasting and whatnot, and it's not an extract. Use real fruit, use real cocoa nibs, use real vanilla beans. Crazy idea, but a lot of people don't. That's important.
And being here in the Bay Area, you've got like such amazing like farmers markets and access to some awesome stuff. I mean, it may not be grown right here, but I mean,
we have access.
You have access to some amazing and there's producers of different, whatever you're into in the Bay Area, you can find amazing coffee, amazing chocolate, amazing bread, amazing whatever, wine. And so, I mean, that goes into, CellarMaker as like a San Francisco brand and like an identity of.
Yeah, we're not a farmhouse brewery. We're in the city, but we got a farmers market down the street that's pretty incredible at the Ferry Building, and we got Rainbow Grocery is amazing. Co-op with all kinds of high quality fruits and vegetables, and we'll use them in a cask and we'll mess around, but we definitely want to buy the highest quality stuff, and it all comes to San Francisco. It's not grown here, but
and I've definitely had some amazing farmhouse style beers here. I did like that the Solera Saison.
Lost Wisdom.
Yeah, so good.
That's something we've been working on for a while, and we're just going to keep doing it. I'd love to have that beer on tap year round if I could.
I've been really interested in the Solera system, and do you want to describe that for the listener?
The basic description would be that it's kind of like a 100-year soup. In the way that we're doing it, we're doing 300 gallons of liquid, and I guess that's the starting point. That's how big the 10-barrel fermenter is, but you got a specific yeast culture that's in there, and then you're essentially pulling about 200 gallons of liquid. For us, that's going into 750 ml bottles, as well as kegs, and we're naturally carbonating that. To me, that's a huge, important part of that style of beer is making sure it's got at least 3 months in the bottle. The one we just put out the last week was 5 months in the bottle by the time it was released. That's where its life really starts in our mind. But you're essentially pulling about 200 gallons, you're leaving 100 in, and then you're topping it off with 200 more, and then you're doing that again. And you're waiting until it tastes the way you like it. And early on, it was about 6-7 months in stainless, and that time is shrinking a little bit.
Right.
It doesn't mean it'll be like that every time.
Right.
The beer tells you when it's done. So that's something that's really fun for us.
Think that
and we dedicate a whole stainless tank. We've only got 7 10-barrel fermenters and 2 20s, and we could just as easily crank out a ton of IPA, have 5 IPAs on tap all the time, yada yada. But balance. We view our beer menu kind of like a food menu. You got to have something to an appetizer. You got your salad, and then you got your main course, and then you got dessert. We want to have a little bit of everything. Tapless balance is so important. A lot of people don't realize, but if you're a brewery in California, if you don't have a kitchen, you can't do yes taps. So you have to make it yourself. And if you're running out of a style, or you don't have something to please that crowd of people who just wants a beer, they just want something like a lager, a Helles, a steam beer. I mean, something simple. Oh, sorry, a California Common. But you know what I mean? Like they just want something. We really want that menu to be balanced. That's super important. So. We do dedicate a tank to the Solera beer, and then the rest it's not dictated by what the market wants. It's dictated by what we want to drink, but it's really first and foremost making sure that tap list has, if there's not a stout or a porter, like what the fuck,
Yeah, you got to get it rounded out.
Yeah,
I mean, so this is an element of, you were talking about tradition versus new school. So you might do, whatever, if the market says, hey.
We did a Taco IPA. There's the most extreme adjunct beer we've ever done. It was like the 16th batch of beer we ever did. Super weird beer, but it really works. And I think adjunct with a purpose is important, and trying to conceptualize that beer in your head and going, does this work? Do I like this? And for me, the huge thing, and this was something that we said over and over when we made taco hands, which we won't talk about anymore after this because I've talked about it before. But it's got to be a beer that you can actually drink a pint of and maybe consider a second pint of, whatever that beer may be, whatever adjunct beer is. When I worked at City Beer, which is an awesome bottle shop in the city, there were a lot of beers, and you pour yourself an ounce, and the whole staff's like, this beer is fucking awesome. And you're like, there's a cool flavor in my mouth. Yes, check that box. But is this something that you'd actually want to drink a 7 ounce of or a pint of or have 2 or 3? That's a huge thing for us too.
Drinkability.
Drinkability is huge, yeah. I mean, lower ABV is nice, but even if it is a little higher up, let's make sure the beer's dried out. It's not cloyingly sweet. Yeah, exactly.
Not too heavy on the booziness, and
then sugar. I mean, beer's already got plenty of sugar in it. Ferment as much of it out as you can.
Well, I was just going to say, like, yes, you guys have done some cool adjunct beers, but then you have something like a Solera system. Like, we're talking about tradition versus new school ideas. I mean, Solera is actually jumping up in popularity right now, but it's something that has been used in, I believe it was sherry vinegar production. But the idea that you have a culture that you're keeping alive is a very old school idea. The fact that you're doing it in stainless is a little bit different. Like, if you go...
A lot of people are doing it in the fooders, and I think we'll, eventually move it to that, but this was kind of something that we had going, and we liked how it tasted, and it's important to have on tap for us. And
you're able to keep it from getting too much oxygen in there as far as, if you have it on wood, you have, maybe a little more worry about acetobacter. And,
totally.
You don't want it to turn to vinegar, obviously.
Totally.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
So
far, so good.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a good example of what you guys are trying to do as far as tradition and new school, kind of play back and forth. We talked about the right and wrong ways to do events for Beer Week, and we're talking about, these different kind of popular beers right now. Another thing that's going on, and I'd like to know what your thoughts on the right way and wrong way to do it, is collaborations. Like, so many collaborations going on, and I know you guys have done some. I think you guys have something.
We've done a lot. Yeah, we. I know it's something we went back and forth on, and there was a period of time where we're like, we've done too many. We need to ease off these for a while. But ultimately, it all comes back to kind of like purpose and intent. And for us, we brew beer with brewers that we have some kind of a friendship with, or our styles are, very much line up, and we have a lot in common, friends in common. But there's always a story behind them. You don't, and we get these emails, and like it's really nice that people want to brew a beer with us, and it's not a weird exclusive thing or anything. It's really just people saying, hey, I'd love to brew a beer with you, and I have this brewery in, Tennessee, and you're like, I've never had your beer. I
don't know.
I don't know. It's a big, long, but it's more, I guess, there's people who, one of the main things for collabs for us is that we always want to make something that neither of the breweries would make on their own.
I think that's a good idea.
I mean, it seems kind of basic, but you see, it's like, we got together and we made a Simcoe Centennial IPA.
And both of them have 3 versions of each.
And you're like, where's, did you put Brett in it? Did you do anything? Okay, no, it's the same old. That's cool. That's a good beer, but you got to do something different. But at the same time, not too extreme, just for the sake of saying.
Because that's the other end of it. You see a lot of those too.
Yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of balance there, and sometimes you just want to give them what they want. We did a beer with Other Half. It was a double IPA. It had a bunch of New Zealand hops in it. A little, American hops.
Probably really tasty.
It was straightforward, really delicious. That's okay too.
Sometimes you just want to hang out with your friends too. So
sometimes you do want to hang out with your friends. Sometimes you're more involved than others. Sometimes it's more straightforward. We just did one a couple days ago, so I'll talk about that because it's pretty fresh on my mind, and I'm pretty jazzed about it. Since we opened this brewery, and even a little bit before we opened it, Tim and I have always been huge fans of La Cumbre in New Mexico. New Mexico's kind of off the radar for a lot of people. They're not familiar with La Cumbre. They've won a lot of awards, but more than anything, it's consistent, really amazing West Coast IPA. Other traditional styles done really well, Pils, Hefeweizen, but we've just had a ton of respect for the brewing science knowledge that Jeff at La Cumbre has, and somebody who we've always been like, man, that's just a top choice to brew a beer with. And we had Batch 500 coming up, and we hit him up, and we've been in contact with him before. The whole South African hop thing kind of started with him getting a little bit. They got him to us. We started talking about it more, and in a city that's not as off the radar. And so he flew out, and we brewed this beer, and it's not something that either brewery has made. We've never made a California Common. So we wanted to make a hoppy California Common, and some people, I don't know, maybe they're team beers, but ours is called Danker's Team.
There's already a dry hopped California Common in San Francisco. I mean, they just put that out.
Oh, I guess maybe we shouldn't do it. I heard they actually discontinued that, so
well,
I see the market has a need.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd like to think of this one as an unpasteurized version that's hopped a little bit more aggressively, and it aligns our love for hops, but it also utilizes a lager yeast, and to me that was different enough, and Jeff was really excited about it, and we all knew we could have brewed a big IPA, double IPA, whatever, and this is a little different, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to be easy drinking, fun beer to have on tap, big aroma.
Is that in the tank right now?
That's in the tank right now.
Very cool. So that you think that'll be out for Beer Week?
That will be out for Beer Week. It's going to miss Rate Beer Fest by about 2 days, unfortunately. But yeah, it'll be out for Beer Week. It'll be hitting its prime on Beer Week, I really think.
So you guys will be at Rate Beer Fest. That's coming up. As far as we were talking about people sending off beer and trading beer and selling beer, that's a whole other can of worms. I mean, do you feel like I think Rate Beer and Beer Advocate, and if you want to go over to the restaurant side, Yelp and things like that, they definitely serve a purpose, and there's some really cool information on these websites. But do you kind of battle with some of the negative that comes with that, as far as there's definitely...
You know what? I look at it as honest feedback that somebody would never be comfortable enough to say to my face. So sometimes you see something that's totally mean or negative and makes you feel pretty shitty for a little bit. You definitely don't obsess over it too much, but you know what? It's honest feedback. Take it for what it is. People on the internet love to complain, and I'm not just talking about beer, about everything. Yelp culture, all that. It's the internet has given people something, they can stand up and say how shitty something was, and people kind of listen to them a little bit. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. Fuck it. Who cares?
Yeah.
Do your thing. Make good beer. Run a good bar. There's
maybe sift through the insults and find that little nugget of gold where it's actually a legitimate thing with the beer.
I mean the Yelp thing. I mean, we if something happened with a negative customer experience, sure, we're gonna talk to our staff and see what happened, and
I like my San Francisco bars to have salty bartenders.
Me too.
Yeah,
me too. I learned how to drink at the Toronado. I drank there a lot.
I like Toronado. I like Zeitgeist. I like. Yeah. So
know what you want to drink when you get to the bar, and tip the bartender $1, and everything will be fine.
I don't think that's hard.
I like to tip him more than $1, but just play the game, do your thing. I don't know. It's bar culture in general right now is interesting. A lot of people are staring at their phones. They're on Untapped. I'm on my phone sometimes more than I should, but at the same time, when you're at a bar, you're having a beer. Life could be a lot worse. You're having a good time, so that's directed at the Yelp culture. And B, talk to your friends and make a new friend and talk to somebody next to you about a beer rather than writing a review on your phone. I mean, sometimes we're serving beers at the bar and 2/3 of the bar is just on this orange app called Untapped.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of funny. I don't know. I would never sit at a chef's table or like at the little 4 seats, at the open kitchen.
You're like at a Michelin restaurant.
And you've just got your Yelp cursor just blinking, and you're like, what's the next course, dude?
Taking a picture of the chef as he's talking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you're like, this is going on Yelp, dude. I would never do that. I mean, obviously it's different, but it kind of cracks me up. I'd just like to see people talk to each other. But it's interesting, all that. It is what it is, man. It's 2017. It's a little weird, but I do like some surly bartenders, that's for sure.
Me too. So, with craft beer, there's like the big, kind of legendary brands. There's grandfather brands like we've got
Sierra Nevada.
Well, so Sierra Nevada, New Belgium is a little younger, obviously, but Sierra Nevada really, and of course Anchor falls into that kind of gray area as far as.
I would say New Belgium was super influential on me because I lived in Colorado for 5 years
right.
during college, and that was that was in the kegerator.
Yeah.
And so was Odell and Mountain Sun and Avery. Really, those 4. To me, that's like the first definition of what beer is, of
right.
what craft beer is in my mind, and a lot of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale that all my family from out here just drank all the time at every family event. And I was like, man, this is bitter. And now it's really, really great. But
so you've got these brands that, we're talking 89 to 95 got, started to get their feet, really dug in, and then you had the first kind of bubble burst, and you lost brands like Pete's Wicked Ale, but but there's survivors like Sierra and Rogue.
It's kind of natural in any industry, yeah.
And then there was this kind of the second wave. I would say 2005 things started really ramping up, and now we're still kind of in that. And some people are arguing that maybe we're in the tail end of that.
I'd say it's pretty crowded right now. If you're a big brewery, I'd say if you want to be a brewery that makes more than 100,000 barrels a year, and you're not already really close to that number,
good luck.
You're late to the party, and you should try and be boutique. But I guess you're in a weird in between. But
so this is going to go into what the question I was going to get to, which is I feel like there's kind of a third wave, and it's a lot of younger folks that were raised in from those two, earlier craft beer kind of rises, but there's this younger generation, call it millennials, whatever. It's a loaded word, obviously, but I feel like there's people there's a lot of people who are really just in it for the craft. I mean, there's always been those people who are in it for the love, but I think there's now enough customers out there that will pay a premium and that can actually make a business out of somebody who is keeping it small. As far as an older business, you can say that that's the Russian River, that's the Vinny model. He grew organically and stayed small, and they're just now breaking ground in Windsor for their new facility. It's taken this long.
Troy Casey called it a lifestyle brewery in an interview I saw, and I thought that was pretty spot on. But I think the people who are involved in the day-to-day, if they have an ownership percentage in the brewery that is somewhat significant, they can make enough money to live their life the way they want to live, and life is really expensive.
Especially in San Francisco.
Especially in San Francisco, yeah, you're telling me. But to do what they want to do and to have a good life and work in an industry that they love, and you don't need to make 20,000 barrels a year to do that. You don't need to make 10,000 barrels a year to do that. Selling direct to consumer, not dealing with distributors, selling your beer selectively in bars that are going to take care of it, and your own tap room or tap rooms, which is a different topic. But I think that's really important.
Do you feel like you're a part of like this third wave of craft beer, where we're talking about younger people, we're talking about different business models? Do you feel like that you're part of this like next wave?
I don't know what wave we're a part of, but to me, selling a beer direct to consumer is where you have the most control. It's where your beer tastes the best. You can't really do that at a large size, plain and simple. Like you're not our oldest beer and the freshest Sam Adams you can find might still not line up. But ultimately, I think that what we're talking about here is there's breweries that are able to serve a small area. They're able to sell their beer in their tap room at a nice margin, which allows them to exist in whatever city or area they are. And it's not about numbers. It's not about quantity. It's not about volume. It's simply about quality beer. And kind of, we say this all the time, but how much is enough? How much do you need to make financially as a brewer and as an individual to be content? There's breweries out there that want to take over the world, and I'm definitely not naming names, but they are just out there to grow and never stop and get another warehouse and another bottling line and then a canning line, and then we're going to get a fourth warehouse, and next thing you know, I mean, it's just this huge beast of a thing. We all started working in a brew pub, and that's what we know how to run, and I don't know that I know how to run a production brewery. Plain and simple. It's
Nor do you even want to.
Do I want? It's and from a this is not about the money. Money is important for your business. Money is important for you have to make a living. I have no problem saying that. But at the end of the day, how much do you need? And if you can sell enough beer to pay yourself a good salary, to pay the people who work for your company a good salary, everyone who's full time here has full health care, like all these little things. What else do you want? What else are you trying to get out of this? Are you trying to take over the world? Are you trying to be in 45 states and I've got 3,000 accounts and just big numbers, and like who gives a fuck, man? Like how does your beer taste to the majority of people who drink it? How does your beer taste to most people? I'm not talking about, you're one of these breweries that makes 100,000 barrels a year, even 60,000 barrels a year. Your brewers are drinking the IPA right off the tank that they transfer 2 days before. They're drinking a one-day-old IPA. They think all is well, but you're shipping your beer to Japan. You're shipping your beer all over the U.S. It's just like, is that what you want? Like, when somebody cracks that beer, wherever the hell it is, like, do you feel okay about it and how shitty it tastes because it's old and because it's oxidized and because it's gotten skunked and sun exposure and all these things? Being a small brewery, you can control 99% of that. And to us, it's a how much do you need?
One of the things I really liked that I heard from Sante Darius was that they were talking about how that because of the amount of like funky beers they put out, they're like, yeah, our lines are probably infected, and that
Tim knows his kegs are infected too. He we have quote unquote Brett kegs, and we'll still put IPA into them because we know bars are serving them fast, but we're not going to exactly like age an Imperial Stout in one for beer week 6 months later.
That's what I was getting to, is that if they know that's going to get drank fast, so they don't care.
I mean,
it's not going to develop. And you're keeping it cold, you're keeping it dark,
I think they're a great example of a brewery that's, what you want to call it, a wave, whatever you want to call it, but they are on the same page as us as far as they're able to sell their beer direct to consumer. And really, like, to me, that is the most satisfying on a very basic level, serving direct to consumer and seeing people's reactions. What made me fall in love with selling beer and selling beverage in general, because I used to sell wine before beer a little bit, is seeing the reaction and being able to either describe a beverage to someone or offer them a beverage that is a little different or more special or just made in a way that they've never experienced, and to see their reaction, whether it's a smile or a look of intrigue or whatever it is, that's so exciting. So if you were to cut that off and not be able to experience that, then you're just working at a company at that point. You got because so much of it is you're just paying bills and doing crap that any other company does. That's like the best fucking part right there. That's
eliciting a reaction
to see somebody get stoked on like a pint of beer. Like, at the end of the day, you're like, yeah, that's why I do this. Fuck yeah.
And I think
that guy's stoked on this beer. Like, it's plain and simple. Like, sure, the money's important, all these things, but really to us, that's the most important thing. And being, we've got some investors, but like we're the people who are involved here heavily have a good stake, and therefore there's an element of really why would we blow it up? If we were to make 10,000 barrels a year, make 5 times more beer, we'd be selling it at a fifth of the margin. I don't even think we'd make twice as much money to sell 6 times more or 5 times more beer than we make now.
Yeah.
How does that make any sense? Why? It's like, you want to jump in the big leagues? Not really.
You think maybe it's
just for numbers?
Ego?
I mean, ego's a thing. I think some people want to take over the world, but it's kind of like, be the really little brewery. I don't know where the mid-sized brewery falls these days, but you're either a big dog or you're a little dog. But when you're in the middle, you're competing with the big guys and the big guy pricing, but you want to do special stuff that the little guys do, and you want to use hops that you can't get in quantities to use in your year-round beers, but you kind of fall in this weird in-between. And are you going to like drop your half barrel $5 or $10 to try and get it down to the price of these bigger brands? Or are you going to try and be special, but you're not, because your beer's everywhere, and because you're big, there's a distributor, so then your beer's old, and then it was stored improperly. And I'm not saying every distributor does that, but a lot do. What are you trying to accomplish, really? So,
I mean, do you feel like? Well, let me backtrack. There's an analogy that I heard that I want to get your opinion on, and it kind of goes back into you're talking about, like, you're not sure where the mid-sized brewery falls. I've heard. Higher ups at some of the bigger craft breweries say, like, there is a storm coming as far as like the end of this second bubble of these guys that grew during that second uprising. And, you have your little breweries, and they're like a little boat on the ocean, and they can see a storm coming, and they can turn real quick because they're tiny.
Yeah, but the big boats, it takes them a while to turn around.
You're either a giant barge, and you're just saying, fuck it, I'm going to go right through that storm, and you will survive. Mm-hmm. You might lose a couple deckhands, but you'll make it through. And
this is the most perfect
and then it's those
ever.
Middle-sized boats. They're like, I don't know what the fuck to do.
Yeah.
I can either turn really slowly and might still get hit.
This is so spot on. I mean, it's pretty much where we're at. I like being small. I like that
you can turn on a dime.
Well, one of our batches is 300 gallons, which is a lot of liquid, but at the same time, like, you can do a pretty weird beer in 300 gallons, and like, worst case scenario, if it's bad, you just dump it.
Yeah.
You did not dump, 100 barrels of beer. You dumped 10 barrels of beer, and you move on. Certain hop varieties, maybe you're only able to get like 50 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what does that mean if you're a big brewery with 100 barrel fermenter? It means nothing. It means people don't taste it. So there's a lot of things, creatively and in general, and just a lot of things you can do as a small brewery to differentiate yourself, to be special, to really have fun with it. From a size perspective, I think it used to be, we want to be a profitable brewery. All right, you got to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and you just keep going, and like there's all this momentum, but at what cost, and what are you really trying to accomplish? Are you trying to be a profitable business? Are you trying to make the best beer you can? Are you trying to make sure that people drink your beer and it's in a really great shape? I think it's really a format thing. Selling beer direct to consumer has an awesome margin, way better than wholesale. It's almost laughable. It's like 5 times as much almost. So you're seeing a lot of breweries who have a tap room, tasting room, kind of attached to their brewery, and they're able to sell their beer at an awesome margin. It makes it so that they don't have to get huge. They don't have to go for numbers as far as quantity and volume, but they can focus on these smaller batches and boutique beers and do things that make no sense to a large brewery or even a mid-sized brewery, because it's a draft-only batch, and you can tack an extra $1 or $2 on the price of the draft and do something crazy, and there's nobody in a room or in a suit or saying you can't do that. And the bigger your brewery gets, the more no's there are, plain and simple, when it comes to beers and being profitable. And you're seeing breweries and they're like, what, this beer is so expensive to make, so we made it an $8 12 ounce. And then people are like, well, the tap room selling that frickin' Budweiser County brand stout for $12 10 ounce, and you're a little guy, and I want to support you, and you're telling me that there's a shitload of mushrooms and cocoa nibs or whatever the fuck is in the beer, and I'm tasting it, and like, sure, I'll pay an extra $1 or $2 to have a beer that is super unique and special. So by eliminating the distributors, really, we've never dealt with a distributor. It's all self-distributed. I'd rather pay a guy, as an entry level, and we just promoted our guy who was delivering kegs and cleaning kegs, and now he's the number 3 brewer here, and he's learning. And
that's awesome.
He's
so
not a big beer nerd. He's just he likes beer, and he likes making beer, and he pays attention. And it's entry level, but I'd rather pay a guy to do that than have a distributor do that and take a cut of a third, which is what they take out of your draft. And you don't make that much on wholesale anyway. So why?
And when the keg gets delivered, they don't. If somebody has a question, they have no idea.
Yeah.
Like, this guy's now a brewer, your guy.
Oh, look at the keg color. It's got the ABV on there.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really a control freak thing, really. If you want to, we have a relationship with everybody who serves our beer. We have a relationship with so many people who drink our beer. We are able to sell it exactly how we want, at exactly what margin, and being able to control that means you don't have to swing for the fences and be a huge brewery. It means you can be small and do whatever you want. Make a crazy beer, and maybe it's silly expensive, but who cares? It was fun. It was worth doing it.
Right.
Other breweries can't touch that. There's a certain point where they just say, no, I can't make that beer, and I want to make it with real fruit or whatever, but I can't.
Can't justify it.
It doesn't appeal to my market, or by the time,
or your margins,
your margins, or it can't. You're going, this is going to be $1.50 an ounce by the time it gets to a store, and like, I'm still not making I'm barely breaking even on it. It's like, so being small, it's there's a lot of freedom, I guess.
Branding always kind of has a sleazy used car salesman kind of vibe to it, but I do think it's important, like, as far as, if you're at this scale, you can really just be yourself, and you can represent. You can have silly beer names, and you can have
I constantly feel like there should be a filter who's like some older person who tells me no all the time, and they're just not there. And as a result, we have some really silly and fun beer names, and we talk about that all the time. We're like, man, somebody should be telling us, no, you can't call a beer Dank Williams and have a parody label, and
right.
Then you're like, we do this, and are we going to get in trouble? And one time we did. Thanks, Dole. But you kind of feel like somebody should be saying no, but it's really fun to kind of do whatever the fuck you want. Balanced tap list, like I mentioned earlier, that's kind of always reins us in from getting too crazy. But I mean, it's fun to do. Kind of.
Do you feel like this also applies to like being able to have a salty bartender, like we talked about earlier? Like,
Yeah.
Listen, like that's what you get when you come here. Like,
I've been salty with a customer before because I knew my bartender was on the fence about something said to them and wants to but can't
and they wanted they needed you to back them up.
You can't say anything to a bartender. You can't say. I mean, they're people too, and some of the way that the ways that people treat service industry in general just drives me crazy. And sometimes you got to push back, and they're totally blown away. Like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. And a lot of people would tell me that's unprofessional, but I have no problem 86ing somebody because they say something inappropriate to female bartender or something. Like you just don't ever need to come back here.
I was going to ask you about hop contracts, and that's obviously we're talking about those bigger breweries that are mid-sized craft or large craft that they decide they want to play with some new hop. I will say that I was talking to one of the guys from Hen House, and they make awesome hoppy beers. They had told me that, like, as soon as like some new hop variety gets hot, they can't use it anymore because the bigger craft brands just buy it up, and then they're like, well, get on to the next one. Like,
we talk about that all the time. We're like, the Budweiser's trying to fuck the little guys by buying out all these breweries, but if they really want to fuck the little guys, they just buy all the Simcoe. Really though, it's interesting how that works, and you can see it when I'm going to name names on this one. When you got Sam Adams, puts out their new IPA or something. There's like a couple sexy hops in there, and then there's a couple where it's like filler. But the bigger you get, like you just have to say again. You have to say it's like what we were mentioning 5 minutes ago. You have to say no to a certain beer because you go, I can't get that hop in the quantity I need, or even close.
And they're not even using it for like an aroma addition. Like they're just like saying they're just doing it to do it. By the way, it's not risky to talk shit on Sam Adams. By the way, so go for it.
Tim used to work there, but I think it's really cool to be able. There's certain varieties they just don't grow enough of, and to be able to use them is really fun, and it's it's a privilege. You're like, hey, I get to single hop this, and there's just not enough for any other brewery to introduce it to their lineup at all. So,
do you guys get really down and dirty on the science and like the different oils of like the hop varieties? Like, do you?
Yes, I don't know how much I want to go into this, but I would say it's interesting to actually one point I wanted to make, something you mentioned about a minute ago. You're talking about bigger breweries and these hop varieties, but when we're interacting with the hop growers, and it's a plain and simple point to say, do you want to let, of course you want your big customers in any business to get a good pick at the good stuff, those people are very important to you. But if you're a passionate farmer, if you're passionate about more than just money and you're a farmer and you're passionate about the quality of your product, knowing that the people who are buying your hops are putting those hops into beer that then gets shipped to a distributor and then to another warehouse, and then it's warm, and then it goes to Bevmo, who also stores it warm. And by the time somebody experiences, ex-hop farmers, Simcoe that was so banging out of the bag, by the time it gets to consumer, like, how well does it represent that person's Simcoe? Like,
and their hard work.
And their hard work, yeah. I mean, like, it's like, you're a butcher and all your meat's rotting.
And it's all going to McDonald's.
And you're like, but I sold it, and I got a new car. But, I think that's kind of important, and I think that, the hop industry is very interesting. And we took our first visit to Yakima this last year, and a lot of different farmers up there, different philosophies, experimental brands. I think the picking window is something really interesting that we noticed is it's so crowded during the heart of that picking window that you could have a pretty badass variety come out, and if it's in the middle of Simcoe and Citra and Centennial harvest, there's just no labor to pick it. Like unless it's better than all of those by a lot, nobody's going to mess with the infrastructure for those other hops that are already there. But if you have this banging hop that doesn't get garlicky, oniony a month after the core picking window,
you're gonna grab
or it's fully mature a month early, like, yeah, man, that's kind of a crazy concept. When you're smelling a variety and you're like, why is this not blown up? And you're like, yeah, well, it's a timing thing. So that's interesting.
You thought you were late to the picking party, and then you find some primo shit, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah. It's really that whole industry is fascinating, and it's growing really fast, just like the beer industry. And our consumers demanding it at the rate that it's. I mean, it seems like they're growing a little more than they need to this year for the first time in a while. Time will tell how the pricing goes with that. I have no problem spending a little more for the higher quality hops. We never have. I think those guys work really hard, and quality is extremely important. I have heard some discussions about hops being blended down to like a happy medium where like all the good and all the bad all goes in, and you're never going to get that amazing hop, but you're not like, and I don't know if that's a little brewery thing. The selection thing is huge, but you got to buy a ton, and we don't. We're small, but at the same time, the conversation with these farmers is, hey, we're taking your Simcoe and we're putting it with this other guy Simcoe who grows 2 miles down the road, and then we're putting it with a Simcoe powder, a lupulin powder, and then we're serving it. We make this IPA in 16 days. And it's on tap, and it's gone in 11 days. And every single pint that was consumed in the tap room, mostly at accounts and out of these growlers, it's just ripping fresh, and it's the best possible. No, I don't want to say that. It's a really good representation of your hop, and as far as execution of freshness and how it's handled, it's a really, really. I don't know if you can really like mess with that. Like, it doesn't really get any better. So, to me, like, if you're a hop farmer, you're hearing that, and you're like, yeah, man, I get paid, but that's really important to hear that people are really taking it to the next level and the way they experience it. And I don't know if this will happen, but I could see farmer brands starting to exist where people are really into a certain farmer's crop. I think that's happening in other industries too. But I think where you go, like, I want hops from X farmer because he crushes it. And it could be a preference thing. Some brewers want a different thing on different hops. We like to keep like 4 different kinds of Simcoe on hand. We have one that's super classic, cat pea, one that's like stone fruit, very like kind of new school Simcoe. I don't know what to call it, but it's different, it's delicate, it's nice, and we do the same thing with the Nelson. And whenever we do a single hop beer, we like to hit it with all these different representations of that variety, not just one. It doesn't mean just because it's a single hop beer doesn't mean it needs to be a single lot beer.
Right.
So if you really want to wrap your head around that variety.
Well, I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about, terroir. Like,
Totally.
And you're saying that, yeah, in San Francisco, we may not have like the farmland for some of this, but we're also talking about hops, and you have the relationship with the farmer.
Yeah.
But going directly to the source and working with them and making sure they know that you're presenting the thing that they put their life's work into in the best possible way, that you can
bring them beer. I mean, those guys, it seems like they get a lot of beer for the first, during the 6 weeks of harvest or so.
And then
but
it
seems like the rest,
yeah.
I mean, like, I don't know. We don't have a marketing department or marketing expenses. So if it's a couple $100 to send some beer out to some hop farmers, like, that's totally important. And who better to drink it? And some of these new varieties come out, or like the lupulin powder. And
I was going to ask if you guys are using.
We sent some out to a farmer, and he's like, I haven't had a beer with this yet. And you're like, dude, like,
you know that some of the big guys are using it. And
yeah. We are using the powder. It's in some ways it'll change the game, but it'll be subtle. I notice a punchiness to the beers that we use it in. I think the best example would be our all Citra Pale Dobus. We did a batch recently, and instead of doing, I guess Dobus has like in a 20-barrel batch, it's about 50-pound dry hop, about 2.5, 2.7 pounds per barrel. Instead of using 50 pounds of pellets, we use 25 pounds of pellets, and then in place of the other 25 pounds of pellets, we used about 11 pounds of the powder. So what's cool about it is you're getting about 5% more yield out of your beer. It's not a lot, but in that case, it's like 10 gallons of beer. I mean, that's cool. It's punchier on the aroma and on the flavor. It does seem to fall off a little bit faster, but that's not a problem for us. That's where a big one of these large breweries we talked about earlier might be shaking their fists in the air, like, new technology tastes amazing, but it means nothing to me because my beer doesn't get into consumers' hands in sub 15 days. I mean, it's still in the queue, first in, first out in the warehouse with 2 batches in front of it that I got to sell through. So, fuck all that. It's not good for me. But we like it a lot. I don't think it's going to take over pellets. I don't at all. I think it's going to be another tool in the toolbox, and it gives you a nice punchy aroma. But I don't know. And the yield thing's nice. It's not huge, but it's nice. But it's something different. But I'd say we put our money where our mouth was and signed up to get those the next like 4 years because we like it. And they're doing Simcoe, Mosaic, the three big ones up there, and it's really nice. It looks like a big bag of keef, and it's really really potent. And one thing I would say, or two things I would actually say. One of them is kind of just a theory of mine, but we crack a lot of bags of hops here, so whatever that means. The first theory would be that when you're using pellets, and this is not a new concept, but when you're using pellets, it's vegetal matter. That's what hops are, right? So by just adding in the powder, you're cutting back on the vegetal thing. So if you want to dry hop a beer to high hell, at a certain point, it's going to start to work against you with that vegetal character, and the powders are going to just, you don't have that. You're not putting all that in there, so it's brighter. But it also, I seem to notice that the same way you get the garlic onion qualities on later harvest of different varieties, it seems like the powder isn't as susceptible to that character.
Right.
I don't know if it's that. If I'm not a hop scientist.
Something from like chlorophyll or something that's
either
like,
that, or I kind of wonder if like is the vegetal matter starting to rot, and that's what is emitting this garlic aroma.
Yeah.
But if you were to tap off the keef for lack of a better word, is that having like the nice bright tropical fruit? Because it seems to not. We haven't noticed any garlic onion, any of that stuff.
So it's not getting grassy from going overboard on it.
Yeah,
and it's also not getting like garlicky, chivy, and
it's like 5 or 10% better in like 4 little ways.
And you get a couple extra gallons of beer.
Yeah, 10 extra gallons. Like we're stoked. That's like 100 pints. We're pumped on that.
That's pretty cool.
So yeah. It's interesting. It's different. It changes the game a little bit, but you can do just fine without it. But it's pretty cool to have.
I put some in a volcano vaporizer the other day and got to smell some of that. So that was fun.
You smelled it? Did you inhale?
I didn't inhale. We just
I feel like it'd probably pinch the lungs pretty
No,
bad.
we just open the bag and get a big face full of the vape from it. So, I mean, as far as IPA goes, do you feel like the category is getting a little bit too broad? I mean, that's something that, I think CellarMaker is obviously known for their hoppy beers, and I feel like you guys are. Of course, we talked earlier. You've made some adjunct beers, you've made some different takes on beers, but I don't see you guys doing a bunch of beers and calling them IPAs.
We haven't done a grapefruit IPA, and we never will.
But do you feel like it's getting too broad? I mean, I'm seeing like sour IPAs. I'm seeing, obviously all the fruited ones. I'm seeing.
First and foremost, is it good? If somebody handed me a grapefruit IPA, as much as I'd love to roll my eyes at it, I don't know if it tastes good. I'll drink it. The IPA. There's a lot of different IPAs. To me,
that's an understatement of the year.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we could go into it big time, but I think to me, there's so many new hop varieties that are so cool, and little companies are putting them out. Indie Hops has experimental hops, and so does Hopsteiner, and so does Yakima Chief, and and then there's New Zealand hops, which are almost experimental hops in and of themselves because people haven't used them, and people are looking to these American experimentals, but they've never even used the Australian hops other than Galaxy. So now you got Enigma, and you got Ella, and all these. So really, like, I think there's enough colors on the hop painter's palette here to stay pretty fucking busy. I mean, like, we're 500 batches plus in, and we still haven't used El Dorado. Like we barely are able to work Equinox in because we still really like Simcoe and Citra and Nelson and Centennial. And we use a lot of new cool stuff. So and we have all these South African hops too, and like there's so much you can do with hops. It's not like 10 or 15 years ago where it was just all kinds of like nice piney classic floral stuff, which are all great hops, and we do love all the classic hops, but you have so many different colors to play with these days.
Right.
Why are you using the fruit, man? Like,
you're still trying to master this other thing. You're still trying to get your grips on this one thing you started. Like, finish what you started.
And you can have so much fun with all these different varieties. Like, why do you go from we made the Citra IPA, now it's time for grapefruit? It's like, wait a second,
hold on. Yeah.
What about Equinox, and what about El Dorado, and all these other kind of varieties that maybe your brewery hasn't gotten into? So very few breweries with a flagship kind of format are able to get through even a third of the new varieties because maybe they've got their seasonal, or maybe one of their handles is a rotating IPA that they do that's experimental or whatever. But that's everything hoppy we do is rotating experimental. I'd say at this point it's probably half repeats and half new. Which has been an interesting evolution, because in the very beginning it's always going to be new every time, and then you hit a point where you're like, I got some of these greatest hits in my bag, and I really like Tiny Dankster, like it's a really great pale ale, so we should probably make that again, because frankly I selfishly just want to drink it.
You miss it.
I miss that beer. But so there's so much you can do with hops and yeast too.
I was just going to say, we're also talking about methods of adding the hops, like when and where and how much you add. Talking about temperatures of your whatever you're dry hopping, or when you're, So we're talking about methods. You're also talking about all the other ingredients and how they're going to express hops. So I mean, your different yeast to play with, your water chemistry, and all these things, and you haven't even touched fruit or any other adjunct.
So I guess that's kind of my opinion on it. We did not mess with different yeast in IPA other than 001 until, I want to say it was a year ago. It was when the first batch of Wicked Juicy came out, which I believe was Beer Week last year. So really we've been 001, which is the for those who don't know, it's a neutral California ale strain that most of the IPAs you drink in California have 001. It's clean, it's neutral, it ferments nice and dry. It really lets the hops shine, so to speak. So we made hazy beer with that yeast for about 2.5 years. It was just unfiltered. It was just heavily dry hops, so its appearance was lightly hazy. And the whole haze thing is kind of crazy. It's been talked about a lot, but we never set out to make hazy beer. I remember we were about 6-7 months in, and one of our regulars came up to me and he's like, "Hey man, when are you going to make another one of the hazy beers?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Like, appearance is important, but it's on these heavily dry hop beers, it's not necessarily on my radar as like the most important thing. I want the beer to smell good. I want it to finish dry. I want it to taste good." That's certain hop combos are better than others. So those are my focuses. There's obviously, you can go into all the other things we mentioned a second ago.
Right.
But I remember this guy was like, "Hey, you haven't made a hazy one in about a month. Like, what gives?" And I'm kind of like, why does this fucking matter? Like, are you happy with the pale or the IPA in your hand? Yeah. Who cares about it being hazy or not? And it kind of stuck with me as it kind of bothered me. Like, why do you care about what it looks like? Like
But clearly that's a thing now.
So, and I don't even know if it was then. I mean, and this was like a short while ago, and sure, there were, the East Coast breweries had been doing hazy beer for a couple of years at that point, but we were using 001, which typically drops clear, so I didn't really understand what the big deal was, but I think it's just, we were heavily dry hopping these beers is what was going on, and some of them were staying hazy, some of them weren't, and there wasn't even a consistency to it. Certain brands, Tiny Dankster, one batch is clear, the next batch is hazy. And I'm like, I kind of like it either way. Like, it's a little soft when it's hazy, and when it's not, it's a little more crisp. But that's okay. It's the same beer, but it isn't. But it doesn't really bother me either way. For a packaging brewery, there's a whole other discussion, and paranoia, and how do we get this, consistent, and da-da-da. But I think that's part of the new, generation you mentioned earlier, brewers that are, just kind of going for it, and they're like, you know what, I like the way this tastes, so I'm not going to worry that this batch is a little hazier or less hazy than the last. So the whole hazy thing is interesting. We never, in my mind, so a guy from California probably shouldn't define the New England IPA, but I'll just say an expressive English yeast, which is the term we use all the time. Hint, hint, that's code for New England style IPA when we say that on our menu. An expressive English yeast, like the Conan yeast, which was used at Alchemist in Vermont, and London 3 is used by breweries out there as well. And there's a couple other yeasts that brewers use. But we were just doing 001, and they were just unfiltered West Coast pales and unfiltered West Coast IPA, which I thought is totally different. And I thought it was fucking hilarious when people are saying, "Oh, this is a New England double IPA." And I'm like, actually, it's got 001 yeast. And then we came out with a collab with Other Half, and we used Conan, and it totally cleared up. And people are like, they made a West Coast beer with Other Half. And I'm like, actually, the one that you think is East Coast is actually West Coast.
And the one that,
is it the haze or the yeast? I mean, yeast is an ingredient. Haze is a part of your appearance, but what's more important?
And yeast is a living thing. You can't always tell it what to do.
Exactly.
Man. Especially if you want to go to these small breweries that are not trying to dial in exact, especially on appearance.
There's
Like,
priorities, but appearance was not
not
top
high up
3
on
by
there.
any
Yeah,
means.
yeah.
I just kind of thought that was funny. I was like, man, this is making my head spin. But I should probably keep my mouth shut. But it's kind of interesting just watching that whole evolution. And some of these beers are really hazy, and I'm kind of somewhat old school in my own mind about. I like beers on the clearer side. Some of the extreme haziness is a bit much for me. I like a nice hazy beer that I can still kind of see through. Is kind of my sweet spot where it's a little soft, it's a little juicy, but it's also not just this, I don't know, the milkshake kind
Right.
of appearance.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
And we've made a couple of those, and I always said, you got to cross the line sometimes to know where the line is.
Right.
And we made a couple that were super freaking hazy, and it's like, ugh. And some of those yeasts, the English yeasts are, it's interesting what they do to the beer, and it's a different character entirely. And some of the hops that are in an 001 beer come out as super diesely or super dank are all of a sudden softened and almost sweetened up by this yeast. And then hops that, to me, like Amarillo or Rawaka, that are super soft in an 001 beer or Motueka, they get kind of like lost in that beer. Or you're adding a hop that like has a slight sweetness to it into a slightly sweet yeast, and then it's like too much sweetness. It's kind of interesting. It's almost like certain lots of like Nelson, for example, can get really diesely, and certain lots of Nelson, I'd be like, oh, throw that diesely Nelson in with an East Coast style beer, and it'll soften it up. But this really beautiful fruity Nelson, let's throw that with 001.
Clean,
we're not trying to hide any of the weirdness in there.
Right.
So that's really interesting, kind of just the way those yeasts interact. And it's not going away to any of the old school brewers that are really upset about it.
Right.
It's going to be a thing, and it'll probably get sectioned off as its own thing in JBF in like 10 years, probably, or 5 years.
Takes a while usually.
Yeah, but it's interesting to watch. I mean, there's a lot of IPA out there, but at the end of the day, like, freshness to me is number one. Hop selection's number two. I'd totally rather have a 1-day-old Cascade IPA than a 40-day-old Citra IPA, even though I prefer Citra of the two.
Right.
So freshness is supreme, and I'd say, having fun with the hops with a purpose.
As with any ingredient, sounds like,
as
including
with any,
adjuncts.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I see other people do a certain combo, and I'm like, man, that's just, to me, seems terrible. But I don't know if people are spinning a wheel or if they're just not familiar with those hops, so they're going for it based off of the little technical notes that are available online regarding that hop. But we, because of our rotational nature, and we brew a lot of hoppy beer, we're cracking bags of these hops all the time, and we're very familiar with them and how they change from crop year to crop year, and how they change from lot to lot. There was a period of time where we made a big generalization about Citra as having like a really weak year, and then it was actually Lagunitas was like, we hate this Melanie, like tangerine, like mango, Citra.
Jeremy likes his dank resin,
super
and
dank.
You guys like your citrusy,
soft fruity.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of funny, like you can't generalize it by year, lot to lot. There's hundreds, thousands of lots. It's really fascinating. And this same thing with the New Zealand thing. You work so hard to get a hop like Nelson, and then like a third of what you're getting is like a different profile than maybe what you're going for, and it's super dank or diesely or kind of like almost noble, spicy character. Right. And you're like, man, I just want that gooseberry thing every time. This was hard enough to get in my hands. So it's interesting. The whole hop world's fascinating. It's growing fast. Everybody's making an IPA. Even what's classic brewery in Cooperstown, New York, Ommegang is making an IPA. Like when I saw that in Beer Advocate or whatever, I'm like, whoa!
Like they're just doing. They were just bringing like Belgian beers to New York.
Yeah,
and then
Allagash hasn't broken yet, and they never will.
Well, what about? And then there's the brewery. They'll do
the breweries, IPL.
Humulus,
Yeah. So that's all kind of interesting. I mean, people want IPA, but make a good one. And I think we're starting to see some brewers and in certain areas who never planned to make an IPA, and then they're like, it just doesn't exist in my market, so fuck, I'm going to make an IPA. There's a couple breweries in Colorado kind of doing that, and it's kind of interesting.
Do you feel like we're just behind on like terminology? Like as far as you have all these different kinds of IPA. I mean, of course, like there's on one level IPA as a term for marketing. Mm-hmm. There's also I was listening to Shady Oaks episode on the Brewing Network session, and they were talking about how they did something where they wanted to put like hoppy farmhouse, and supposedly with the labeling with the TTB, they're like, oh no, you have to put like IPA. Like they dictated to them like accepted terms on a label.
They're just trying to do them a favor so it sells better, man.
So, yeah, it's. I mean, but do you feel like we're just behind on like different kind of like terminology? Like you can do like maybe should there be more styles? Or should there be less styles? Should we be like has experimentation like gone further than what our current language like?
It's just beer, man. No, I mean, it depends on how much you want to get into it, really. Like, it's all about what's in the glass. If it tastes good, if it, and it's made well, and I don't know. That's number one. Like, the way you categorize a beer is definitely not even close to the top of the priority for us as a brewery. Like, obviously you got to put something on your beer board, but like, that's for the BJCP dudes to figure out. Like, it's not up to us. I know what you mean. There's so many different IPAs, but I don't know. I find one.
Just make something good.
Find one you like, and and
drink it locally.
Yeah. Drink it locally. Drink it fresh.
What do you want to see more of in this new year? We're in January of 2017. As far as the beer scene goes, what do you want to see more of? And then the follow-up question is, what do you want to see less of? You can answer in either order.
I think I constantly mention what I wanted to see less of throughout this. The adjunct thing, definitely. I think adjunct with a purpose, and I think even if you go by like the traditional Belgian mentality that like if you're going to use coriander and orange peel and these things, that people should kind of notice them, but it's not the first thing they notice, and they don't mention it, and until you told them that those things were in the beer, you weren't fully convinced or aware, or it wasn't on your radar. Like nuances, like let those adjuncts tiptoe around in your beer and do their thing, but when you're just slugging someone in the face with adjunct flavors, it's kind of artificial and it's too literal. That's just my opinion, of course. That's why we're on a podcast. But I don't know. There's a little tradition that I'm into with that kind of stuff. This might sound totally cliche as far as what I'd love to see more of, but I do love these kind of light lagers, and Society's doing it really well with the Bachelorettes. Lagers are really hard for us to make with limited tank space. It's kind of like, well, we could fuck that Solera beer and just make a bunch of lager and probably be really happy with that too, and that's a big toss-up. Maybe we should think about that. But
don't get rid of that Solera.
No, I know,
it's
right? I know. So it's these are the decisions you have to make. But easy drinking lagers, lightly hopped beers are definitely something I'm into, and just the local thing. I know trading happens and all that, but support your local brewery. Super cliche, but drink beer at the source out of a bright tank is it's really as good as it gets. Beer that hasn't been moved around and is in a undisturbed kind of place as far as freshness goes is, to me, that's the top of Beer Mountain. You want to drink really fresh beer off a bright tank that came out a couple of days before, and breweries with a format like ours, and there's plenty of other ones in the Bay Area. Alvarado's doing it, same thing. Brewery, they announced that they have a new IPA on tap. Well, they didn't sit on it for weeks. Like they transferred it a couple of days before, and it's on tap, so you should go drink it. And like, shit, 8 years ago, I didn't know where I could go where social media and the fact that breweries were rotating and didn't have flagships, I don't know anywhere I could go where I would know in my heart of hearts that I was having a one-day-old IPA. Like, that didn't exist. Like, I probably would have driven really far back in the day to do that because everyone had a flagship. So you're like, I don't know if I'm drinking the end of the last batch or the beginning of the new batch or whatever, and it's all good and fresh if you're at the brewery and it's turning over pretty fast. But, I mean, the idea that when these new beers come out at these newer, smaller breweries, this new wave you're talking about at a certain size, like, knowing that you're drinking a one-day-old beer, like, that's pretty cool. Like, that didn't exist a while ago. So hyper-local neighborhood breweries, small batch beers.
Less adjuncts.
I don't want to say table beers, but I do like, that 5.5 range is pretty nice. So
sounds good. Well, thanks for having us. Looking forward to trying some of your new the collaboration with La Cumbre you mentioned.
It's a collab with Other Half and Trillium coming up. We're brewing in about a week and a half here. Doing another collab with Tired Hands, which is always a blast. And and we're actually brewing with Alvarado on Wednesday as well.
That's awesome.
So it's a
busy. You're busy.
yeah, a lot of collabs, but they're all good people and they're all good friends and they're all people whose beer we respect the hell out of. So that's important to me.
Cool. Looking forward to seeing them. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, bud.